There are mornings that don't feel like the beginning of something new. They promise no change and offer no relief. They feel like just another day in an endless cycle of survival. You wake up and the first thought that visits you isn't what will I do today, but rather how will I make it to sunset? But sometimes, without warning or fanfare, one quiet, almost unnoticeable morning changes everything. It seeps through the cracks in your armor and makes your heart beat just a little differently. Claire arrived at the lake long before the world began to wake. She loved this time when the darkness had started to turn gray, but the sun had not yet decided to claim its rights. Lately, her own home had become too small for her. Ever since Robert passed, every room had turned into a battlefield of memories. Here was his favorite chair. There, an unfinished book on the nightstand. And in the kitchen, his favorite mug with the chipped handle still stood, the one she could never bring herself to throw away. The silence in the house was dead. It pressed on her shoulders, making it hard to breathe. But here, at the water's edge, the world seemed to stand still with her. The lake didn't judge her for still crying at night. It didn't rush her to pull herself together, as well-meaning friends did. It was simply there. Claire walked onto the old wooden dock, which over the long years had become gray and weathered by water and wind. This dock remembered them all. It remembered Robert teaching a young Daniel how to cast a line, and how the three of them used to sit here, feet dangling in the cool water, eating watermelon and competing to see who could spit a seed the farthest. She spread out an old towel and sat down, hugging her knees. The sun began to rise slowly, painting the mirrored surface of the lake in incredible shades, from deep indigo to a delicate, almost transparent gold. Mist crawled lazily over the water like a white blanket. Claire closed her eyes and took a deep breath. For the first time in 2 long years, she felt not a heaviness in her chest, but something forgotten peace. For one fragile moment, the grief that had become her second skin loosened its grip. Quiet, measured footsteps on the wood made her flinch. She didn't turn around. She knew those steps. Daniel. Her son, her only living link to the past. He approached and stood beside her, looking at the same golden path on the water. He had become so much like his father, the same jawline, the same weathered hands, and that gaze fixed somewhere beyond the horizon. I knew you'd be here, he said softly, sitting down beside her. Mom, did you stay up all night again? Claire smiled, but there was more sadness than joy in that smile. Night is the hardest time, Danny. When the world goes quiet, thoughts become too loud. Nos dis. But here, they turn into a whisper. Daniel pulled out 2 cold, beaded bottles of lemonade. The gesture was so mundane, so much a part of their old life, that it took Claire's breath away. Remember how Dad always grumbled about us bringing too much food, but was the first to open the bag the moment we hit the dock? He asked, handing her a bottle. Oh yes, she laughed, and the sound of her own laughter felt strange to her in the morning silence. He used to say that fresh air stirs up a beastly appetite, even if we had just finished breakfast. They sat in silence, sipping the cool drink. And that silence wasn't burdensome. It was healing. Claire looked at her son's profile and suddenly saw what she hadn't noticed through the veil of her mourning. His eyes were just as tired as hers. He was carrying this burden too, but he did it silently, trying to be strong for her. Danny, she called softly. It's hard for you too, isn't it? I was so busy with my own pain that I forgot to ask about yours. Daniel remained silent for a long time, watching the ripples on the water spread from a tossed pebble. Sometimes it feels like I'm still waiting for his call, he admitted, his voice trembling for a second. I want to ask for work advice or just tell him how my day went. And then I remember. And the room suddenly feels empty. I try to be the man he wanted me to be. But sometimes I just want to be that little boy who fell off this dock again, knowing that Dad would pull him out. Claire touched his hand. Her fingers were cold, but his were warm and strong. He would have pulled you out, she whispered. And he still does. Through your actions, through your kindness. You are the best thing he left in this world. They sat there until the sun climbed high, drying the dew on the planks. The conversation drifted from sad memories to funny ones. They remembered that ridiculous tent Robert tried to pitch in a downpour, and how they all ended up sleeping in the car, soaked but absolutely happy. They remembered his terrible jokes and his habit of singing old rock ballads in the shower, completely out of tune. You know, Daniel said, standing up and brushing off his jeans, I don't think he'd want us to turn our lives into an altar to his memory. He loved life. He loved this noise, this laughter, this lemonade. Maybe it's time to start. Just breathing again. Not for anyone else, but for ourselves. Claire looked at the lake. It was still shimmering in the sun, eternal and calm. She realized that healing doesn't come as a sudden epiphany. It comes as a quiet whisper of the tide. It begins when you allow yourself to smile without feeling guilty. It begins when you take the hand of someone you love and take that first step away from the dock. Let's go have breakfast, she said, standing up. I'm hungry. I think this air really does stir up a beastly appetite. Daniel smiled and put his arm around her shoulders. They walked slowly to the car, leaving the lake behind. Claire knew there would still be difficult nights ahead. She knew the house would still feel empty. But today, in this quiet morning, she understood the most important thing. Life hadn't ended. It had simply changed its form. And as long as they remembered the taste of lemonade on the dock and the warmth of the morning sun, Robert would always be with them. Sometimes to find the way home, you must first come to the lake. And let the silence say everything we don't have the words for.